Welcome back everybody to another episode of our weekly Moto News Update, where this time we'll round up some new 2026 paint schemes from Triumph, new paint for BUELL and new paint on a Yamaha race bike. Then BMW have also released some new colour options for their lineup too, and we've also got the full details of Honda's new CUV-E. Then we've got a crazy good giveaway that we're running in partnership with Chigee. There's some news around some stricter measures coming into play for MOTs here in the UK. Then we've got new lids from ARAI and SHOEI. Harley get hit with a huge fine in Japan. We've got the latest on ENFIELD sales figures, and we'll round off this week with a look at a very special bike from BROUGH and watchmakers Richard Mille. Wait a minute though, this is the first time I've had to do this since starting this news roundup a few months back. But just as I started to edit, I got a press release that I had to include, and so yeah, we've had to cut this little bit in. It's Triumph with their Scrambler 400XC, which they launched in India a few weeks back, and we covered it back then, thinking though that it was for India only. Turns out they say it's been so popular that they're going to launch it elsewhere too, and so we're going to get it in the UK as of September, I believe, and it'll come in at just around $6.5 grand. It isn't substantially different to the regular Scrambler 400X. There's no more suspension travel or anything like that. But it does get a bit more of an off-road ready image because it's got the spoked wheels, a little bit of a high front mudguard, a fly screen, and also some maybe slightly more vivid paint jobs. There's a yellow, for example. So yeah, on the one hand, it's an extra 500 quid versus the X, and it doesn't really offer you anything substantially different in terms of the riding experience. Plus, it is about 6 or 7 kilos heavier, but as for the looks, well, it's got to be said, it's a very handsome little bike. And so certainly want to have a look at if you like your kind of off-road aesthetics, mainly let's say in a retro package, and maybe you just want to dabble in a little bit of off-road riding, but mainly ride on the road. Definitely one we'll be looking to get hold of for review when they come out in September. And so yeah, I think they've done a fairly nice job on this one. But first up, let's take a look at some of those new paint jobs that Triumph have got on offer for this year, which they announced earlier this week in one big old batch. There is a lot of carryover as well, but we'll focus specifically on the fresh offerings here, and we'll start with the Street Triple, which now comes in granite with some turquoise accents for the RS version, which I do rather like. And then the slightly lower spec R model is now available in a sapphire black with some grey and red on the graphics. Then with the modern classics, well, the Speed 400 now comes in a new white and black paint job, which does get a little gold stripe down the tank, which I think helps to give it a bit of a lift. And then the Scrambler 400X is available in their very punchy signature Baja orange, this time with a diagonal silver stripe. The Scrambler 1200X was new for last year with a slightly lower price point and lower seat height, as well as the XC model that it replaces. And for this year, it's now available in a matte khaki green, and I think with the big oversized Triumph logo as well, this was always going to look really good on a Scrambler style bike. In the adventure lineup, you've got both the Tiger 900s getting a couple of new finishes each, with the more road biased GT version now coming in sapphire black, or Snowdonia white with black, and then a hint of Triumph's performance yellow on the leading edge of the radiator shrouds there. Now the Rally Pro, which is more so spec'd up for off-road riding, gets a Snowdonia white as well, but without the sort of fluo stripes. But if you do want a bit more punch, there is a black and performance yellow, and it does give it a bit more of that rally vibe. Last up with these ones, we've got the Rockets. The GT, which is the more comfort biased of the two, well, that gets a new black and granite with a little bit of red pinstripe in. Whereas the R-Spec Roadster comes with the Baja orange that we saw earlier on the Scrambler 400X, and then black on the bottom half of the tank, which I think does suit its more sporty character, and I can see this one being quite popular. So that's the rundown, and as always, I'd love to know in the comments which would be your pick. Meanwhile, over at BUELL, they've just announced the 2025 version of their Hammerhead 1190 in its Freedom Edition. Now, I believe they first launched a Freedom Edition a couple of years back to celebrate 40 years of BUELL motorcycles. And although this 2025 version is very much along the same lines of, you know, stars and stripes, well, you can see, if you put them side by side, it has evolved a little bit, and I think it's slightly better done. So yeah, very nice to admire indeed, and I suppose it's probably a bit of a hoot to ride as well. It's got 185 horsepower from that 1190V twin, and perhaps we'll actually get to try one at some point, as they have recently also announced that they've got an importer now in the UK. Also running a special livery for August SUZUKA 8 Hours Endurance Race, we've got the Yamaha racing team with a tribute to the original R7 to celebrate Yamaha's 70th anniversary this year. Now, the Yamaha teams in MotoGP ran something similar a couple of weeks back at the Dutch round, but I've got to say, this SUZUKA bike specifically looks especially good to me. They've also made something available, we covered this a couple of weeks back, on their new dirt bike lineup as well, and so hopefully we see this on a couple of road models. I think like a R9, for example, would look brilliant in a very similar finish. So yeah, paint jobs, definitely the theme of the episode this week, and BMW have also been at it with their production bikes, with, like Triumph, a whole bunch of them announced in one go, and so we'll take a look through these one by one as well. First up, the M1000XR, which is the super sporty premium spec version of their S1000XR Tall Sports Tourer. Well, this one now comes in Aurelius Green, which is a bit of a surprise to me, but I do think it does look rather good. You see, up until now, pretty much all the M bikes have been generally available in those M Sport colours, over like a black or carbon base or a white base coat, maybe aside from the M1000RR, which I think they did in a Sao Paulo yellow for a bit. But I will say this green does look quite classy, and so maybe it's a nice evolution. Then the entry-level adventurer, the F800GS, well, that gets a new gravity blue paint job, as well as a couple of new windscreen options. And the F900GS Adventure gets this new sage green version, which I think looks spot on. I've always thought that's quite a good looking bike, actually, the 900GS Adventure, but even more so now. And then yeah, they've made some small changes to the finish on the regular F900GS, but we're talking, I think they've taken a bit of tape off the front mudguard of both the yellow and the trophy colours, so essentially they're exactly the same. The 1300GS though, well, this does get a big significant change, because you can now get it in this very punchy red called Racing Red Non-Metallic, so almost like a Ducati red. And so definitely good news if you wanted a GS with a bit more pizzazz. Also, the fancy Option 719 finish, which was previously this green and gold, well, that's now a really quite nice blue, and it also does keep hold of the gold rims, so again, another nice change and something fairly colourful. Now, then we've got the retros, so the R1290 is now available in Imperial Blue Metallic, although they didn't really include any particularly good pictures of this in the press release, and I can't see it on the configurator yet either, so I can't really give you much commentary. But the R12 Cruiser, well, that's now available in Gravity Blue Metallic, and also the Option 719 swaps from silver with the little yellow and black accents to a meteoric dust to metallic. So I think like a dark grey. Rounding us off on the BMWs, we've got their CE04 electric scooter, one of the most viewed, I think, reviews on the entire channel. Surprisingly, it's got over 500,000 views. Quite weird, that one. But that now comes in white as standard, and then you can also pay a bit more for a blue. So yeah, some nice stuff from BMW, but I think probably the most welcome would be that red GS. Anyway, speaking of electric scooters, Honda have just announced the full details of their second electric two-wheeler called the CUVe. Now, CUV is a name they've actually used before in the 90s for this bike called the CUVES. And the theme apparently is that it stands for Clean Urban Vehicles, so of course, completely appropriate here for a bike that, it has to be said, is aimed entirely at town riding. You can tell that from the specs. It's got a 6 kilowatt motor, so that's about 8 horsepower. You'll get about 50 miles per hour top speed out of it, and also about 40 miles of range. Although I will say that it's got 2 batteries and they're both removable, and so that should make it nice and easy to charge them in the office, or if you live in a flat, you can carry them upstairs. And also, I suppose, to some extent, it makes it a bit less desirable, or a bit less easy as well, to steal. So security might be better if you take the batteries out too. Charging, they say, takes 6 hours from 0 to 100%, so fine if you're charging it overnight. And they also say it takes less than 3 hours if you're going from 25 to 75%. So again, if you're in the office, it'll probably get you home. Interestingly though, for this one, they're running the launch event in Oxford in the UK. I don't know if it's UK only or international, but I haven't been doing that many, well, I'm not really doing any international launch trips at the moment. And so this is one I can actually go to, which is great. So I will be reporting back on it as to whether it's any good, specifically with, town riding in mind. And I can only say at the moment, I'm looking forward to it, but I do wish one thing, and that's that they made it a little bit more funky looking. I think that's something that BMW got right with the CE04 and CE02, whereas this, it's tastefully done, but also for the paint jobs, you've got just white, grey and black. It's not like Honda can't do it either. That CUV-ES that it's named after from 1994, well, look at that. Brilliant, in my opinion, and I'd much prefer to ride a bike that looked like that. Anyway, if you do love your gadgets and that sort of stuff, then we've got an incredible giveaway for you this week, and we're running it in partnership with our sponsors at Chigee. We recently featured actually their new AIO-6 system on the channel, which basically allows you to transform any motorcycle, be that old or new, with a whole suite of the latest and greatest techie features. It's all managed through a full color touchscreen, but then you can hook it up to dash cams both front and rear, and the one at the back also gives you blind spot warnings. Then you've got GPS built in, so you can also use it as a tracker, and on some of the models you've got a 4G SIM, and that allows you to use the Chigee app to check in on your bike remotely, and you can even look at the dash cams to get a good check that your bike's safe and sound. Then you've got CarPlay and Android Auto, so you can use all your favorite apps through this nice big screen. There's an OBD2 adapter as well to get data from the bike, so you can use it as a secondary dash for speed and revs and data like that. Also, you've got TPMS available, tire pressure monitoring with their own little dust caps that measure the pressure and send it to that head unit, along with a whole range of other adapters and accessories. And so it really is the perfect way to either refresh an old bike with some of the more up-to-date technology, or you could see it as another way to bypass the expensive manufacturer accessories. So yeah, we're giving away a Chigee AIO-6 LTE, that's the one with the data built in. But there is more to this one because we've managed to put together a bit of a bundle. You see, you can also use it to control some of Insta360's action cameras and 360 cameras, and so we're also throwing in one of their latest Ace Pro 2s along with a couple of mounts. Then you can also use the CarPlay feature to view Moto, which is another one of our sponsors, and they've built their own dedicated motorcycle navigation app that uses their in-house algorithm to seek out the best twisty biking roads on a given route. Moto are throwing in a year's premium membership, so you can use all of their features through the Chigee AIO-6. And so please do head to the link down in the description below to find out how to enter. It's really simple, just put in your name and email and we'll be drawing the winner in a few episodes time. So once again, a massive thanks to Chigee for their support, for sponsoring this video as well, and also for putting up such a brilliant prize. Also, a quick reminder that our Pando competition is still open too. With this one, you can win a jacket, jeans, and gloves of your choice from their website. And that's another quick one to enter, so do head to the link in the description for that one as well, and stick in your details, and you'll also find down there a couple of discount codes. Next up, we've got an interesting story from over at Visor Down, where they report that MOT stations could be about to introduce photo checks to crack down on illegal modifications and also MOT fraud. For anyone not familiar, our international audience, for example, an MOT is basically an annual check for your bike or car to make sure that it's still roadworthy. Basically, a local garage will go through a checklist of inspections and make sure everything's fit for being on the public road. Some testers, though, are a little more lenient than others. There are certain things like, your license plate's got to be a certain size, or you can't have a super loud, non-homologated exhaust. And whilst, anything that's really wildly outside of the regs is probably going to get flagged up, they maybe are lenient with fellow bikers for minor stuff. That's exactly why they're trialing this new photography system. Basically, for the last 6 weeks, or 6 weeks earlier this year, they trialed it with 62 MOT testing locations where they had to upload photos of the vehicles, be that, bikes or cars, and it goes into the MOT testing system and gets attached to the MOT record for that specific video. So that means if anyone did want to check in later down the line, perhaps an inspector or someone like that, they could visually see the bike that was tested and kind of validate the MOT report card. So a big incentive, I suppose, if you're a tester, to make sure that you're doing it properly. And I guess that probably will mean that in some instances, they'll be tightening up a little bit on modifications. So yeah, I'd love to know what you guys think of this. Is it a sensible move? Or is it another step too far in terms of nannying that's kind of taking the fun out of biking? Personally, I do like little mods and stuff here and there on the bike. I love looking at customs and stuff like that. And so I would see it as a bit of a shame if they stopped using common sense for some of the more trivial stuff and just started going, you know, extremely by the book. But at the same time, I can appreciate, you know, some people might take the piss a bit. So maybe it'll be a good thing. Anyway, next up, a bit of helmet news. And firstly, we've got some new lids from ARAI in collaboration with Triumph. I think these were announced a little while back actually, but they seem to be arriving in dealers at the moment because I've noticed on Instagram a bunch of Triumph dealers posting pictures of them while they unbox them. For the retro fans, well, there's the Concept XE. Then you've also got their full-face Quantic lid as well. For the adventure riders, there are actually two versions of their Tour X5, whilst the more dedicated trail riders might prefer their MXV Evo in that Triumph Performance yellow. To be fair, I think these all look pretty decent, especially the X5 in that green. Although being ARAIs, they aren't cheap. They range from about 550 up to almost £700. But I'm still not entirely sold on having like gear that matches your bike. I'm not sure if it looks a little bit too much. So possibly, I'd probably just go for a plain ARAI. But let me know what you think in the comments. Meanwhile, SHOEI have just released a new version of their open face lid in order to meet the latest safety standards, and it should be landing in shops within the next month or two. This one is the J.02, I'm not quite sure how you're meant to pronounce that, but it comes in at around 350 quid, and along with making sure that it meets those new safety regs, they've also added a couple of new features like the studs across the top so that you can now fit a peak, which gives it a bit more of a scrambler look, and also from a practical perspective will help to block out a bit of sun. Now with this one, there are 13 finishes for this new version, and I think my pick of the bunch might be this almost turquoisey greeny blue with a big orange stripe and a thinner white stripe. That one looks very, very good indeed, and I might have to pick one up for reviewing retro bikes. Now it looks like Harley Davidson have been in a bit of trouble in Japan, recently getting a $1.4 million fine, according to this piece over on Rider Part. The issue was that they'd been putting lofty sales quotas on their dealers out in Japan, and if they didn't hit them, they'd been threatened with losing their Harley contracts. That led to dealers buying a lot of bikes to make sure they hit those quotas, but they weren't particularly confident they could sell them all, and that meant registering them, and they lose value, and then they sell them at a loss, and so really it's not good for the dealers themselves, only really for Harley. So yeah, they've been under investigation since 2024 by the Federal Trade Commission in Japan, and so this seems to be the outcome, along with instructions to immediately cease these quotas moving forward, so potentially good news for dealers out in Japan. Enfield, on the other hand, well, they seem to be going along quite nicely at the moment, with a report on the Economic Times claiming they're 22% up year over year in terms of bikes sold for June this year. That's very impressive, especially when you consider the state of the rest of the market. You know, we've reported a few times that it is very challenging conditions out there, and so they must be doing something very right indeed. Personally, I think they've been knocking out some really good bikes, and they managed to knock out, you know, 2, 3, 4 every year, and they're pretty much always offering really good value for money, so perhaps proof you don't need to offer all the latest top spec and tech in order to sell bikes. That said, at the complete opposite end of the spectrum perhaps, launched this week at the Le Mans Classic, we have this, a collaboration between high-end watchmaker Richard Mille and BROUGH. This one's called the RMB01, and there'll be just 150 of them made worldwide, and they say it's been specifically designed to mirror some of the techniques and ideas that you'll typically find in watchmaking. when you look at it as well, the details are incredible. I mean, look at the brake discs, for example. You won't see attention to detail like that on any other bike. I think they've nailed the overall stance of it as well. It looks really aggressive. And just look at that cockpit. Again, I don't think you'll find many bikes that will come close. Definitely one to admire. Although unfortunately, no price on this one because you have to inquire through a Richard Mille dealer. So it's almost certainly a case with this one of if you have to ask, then you probably can't afford one. As always, I'd love to know what you think of this week's stories, so do let us know down in the comments below. And I'll also put a playlist on the screen now with this week's content in case you missed it. First up, we've got a review of the new Ducati Street Fighter V2, which I thought was really very good, so do give it a click to find out why. And then also an overview of Suzuki's very cool looking new retros based upon their 800 parallel twin platform. Do hit subscribe for more of the latest motorcycle news and reviews right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.